I'm Michael Clark for Meet the Farmer TV. We've been looking at transgenic material and the dangers of modified plant genes and companies that can own those plant genes. Now we're going to look at what you can do as an individual to grow some food yourself, save some seed, and at least support the local farmers that are growing natural products for you. This program is a production of Meet the Farmer TV, LLC, in association with Planet Earth Diversified, Melli Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design. And some of these old varieties, like we know about the heirloom tomatoes, you can barely get it picked and taken to the table before it splits. I don't know how you move it across the country or send it to somebody to sell a week later.
Oh man, and you know, from time to time, like we do some work with Mother's News magazine, and one of the things they do is they'll take some variety that we or some other heirloom company offers and do, you know, analysis, like the Floriani Flint corn that has more protein, you know, available there, just eating the same thing that you would otherwise. And, you know, some of the tomatoes, they can't produce as many tomatoes per plant, but you have more nutrients in each one that you eat.
So we got to eat closer to the farm.
Absolutely.
I've had an experience with Whole Foods where last year they had some heirloom tomatoes that were delicious, that tasted like the tomatoes that I used to grow 50 years ago, you know, that really tasted like they came from good soil. This year, they now have heirloom tomatoes that are grown in a totally different way. They're the same seeds, they look similar, but the flavor is absent.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, in other words, they figured out that now people are interested in these heirloom tomatoes, and now they're milking it to make it the production cheaper instead of maintaining quality.
This year, it's a tough year to get good the good taste.
Tremendous pressure from the buyers too. We need them greener.
Right.
And you know, so we're picking these beautiful, ready-to-eat things, and they're like, we can't use those. They're no good.
Yeah.
And a farmer's only going to pick beautiful heirloom tomatoes and have them turned away at receiving once.
Yeah.
And then he'll do whatever you want. Okay, you want them hard rocks? Fine, we'll bring you hard rocks. And they're not going to taste as good.
Right.
But that's what they need for the supply chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people don't even like to buy them when they're perfect. You know, in a market, they think, well, I'm going to bring them home and have them in 3 days. How long will this last?
Yeah. Will it last 2 weeks?
Yeah.
It's like it's fresh lettuce. It'll last 10 minutes if you leave it in your 90-degree car.
Yep.
You know, if you don't eat it before you leave it in the car, you've lost it.
Yeah.
But that's what people want it to be, like a TV dinner. They can pull it out 6 months later and push a button and it's food.
I tell them if they wanted to keep, get some roots.
Well, now we're worried about the potatoes because they, you know, maybe those skins are set by an herbicide kill. And
Well, that's why you ought to get winter CSA going in your local area.
Yeah. Our children are going to have trouble we don't even recognize because we've contaminated the food supply with these transgenic materials. They're going to cross. Whether you get sued or not for it, pretty soon you're not going to have any heirloom varieties that are uncontaminated.
This is definitely one of the things with, you know, joining these various lawsuits. They say we feel like you need to go after it 3 ways. Sue them whenever you can. Why not? Maybe we'll win one. And then the other is lobby as much as you can, because as I say, you might not think it makes that much difference, but I can remember being a child and being drugged by my grandmother down the streets to some march, you know, and she said, nothing may happen in your lifetime, but you are not going to have a better future if something doesn't. So I'm going to take you here, you're going to walk with me. And then when enough people were, you know, made aware of the bad things that are happening, and for us it's important to let them know about these risks to their health, to their children's health, to the health of our animals, so that people will join in our fight. And we have nothing to lose except the life that we want for ourselves, so we better fight for it. And then we're spending money. Spend your money in the right way.
Yeah.
All of these things together might prevail.
You know, and back in May 25th, we had around the world 456 marches in major cities all over the world, including the United States. That was a tremendous outpouring of sentiment. And that's better than marching in the halls of Congress, where these lobbying dollars and campaign contributions, you know, are so overpowering to our ability to get anything done. But if we're in the street and in the U.S. equivalent of Tahrir Square, you know, then we'll begin to make things happen.
Yeah.
And that's the only way we can get things happen, because we do not own the political process anymore in this country, especially on this issue.
Somehow we've got to make it so that the farmers doing the right thing make enough money that they become financially competitive with the corporations that aren't.
Well, this is, you know, what started out when people started with CSAs. It was one way of saying, I care enough about this food that I'm going to pay my farmer a reasonable amount for that food. And the more that you tell people that being a good person that is trying to build this life means allocating more of your resources to food is important. And I feel like sometimes that we emphasize that. You know,
we've been driving people off of the land in the United States at the average rate of over 1,000 a week for 77 years, going back all the way into before World War II. And that's what we were all about with the American agriculture movement when we rolled tractors across the country. Is we were trying to stop an actual effort to push farmers off the land by making it possible to make a living. And then we were talking about parity prices. But the real issue was farmers are a resource. Farmers are, I mean, now we're having to bring people from the city back onto small farms in order to get things going again. But I didn't foresee the possibility of much of that happening, you know, back those years ago. And so I thought we needed to do everything we could to stop this business of pushing people off the land in order to mechanize and industrialize our food production system, which is what basically we've been doing.
well, you know, there are young people out there doing incredible things. I love, you guys know about Farm Hack. I love it when people who have technical backgrounds say, I want to farm and I want to do it a little bit easier on my back. And so they're reinventing how you can farm on a few acres and making it more like we can have more farmers into the future. All we need to do is support them so that they don't go broke.
How does the general public sort through all of that and find what they need to do? Do they have to wait till they get cancer and have it traced to one of these things? Or realize that, oh gee, my kids, you know, they're only 11 years old, but they look fully matured because the hormones of the meat and the milk, they're developing too soon. I mean, there are all kinds of studies that show us all these conflicting information. How do you reach out to the general public and give them some handle in deciding what they should ethically do?
Well, especially when they have such a public relations juggernaut painting us as Luddites who are not wanting to keep up with the future and want to stay stuck in the past with all this great science that's coming along. What's wrong with us is basically their attitude. But we think, and if we get our day in court, which they don't want us to have, because if we get our day in court, we will then be able to show what's wrong with their science. Then they've been able to prevent that story from getting out in this country. They got it out in Europe, but the stuff that's happened in Europe doesn't get covered in the United States. Partly, I think, because the corporate media in this country have collaborated with the interests of the corporations and the idea that science is good and all these things are wonderful.
We've had a number of these things. I mean, I grew up in in a modern elementary school, and there was asbestos popcorn all over the ceiling, and it was going to save us from fires. You know, and we'd throw pencils up and stick in it and stuff it. But, you know, and we dealt with in my first chemistry classes, we dealt with carbon tetrachloride and making cocoa butter from chocolate. And all of these things now are horribly considered toxic. We played with mercury in our hands, little bubbles, you know. And so these things we were teaching kids about science. And I participated in it and had no idea what the...
Going to the shoe store and putting your feet in an x-ray machine.
Right.
Yeah.
What you see is, that seems absurd to us now, that we would play with mercury, that we would breathe carbon tetrachloride, that we would cover our kids' ceilings all day long with asbestos. And so your vision is, this is the same thing we're doing with transgenic material.
That's right.
We are blanketing the world with something we're going to find out in a generation is really bad news.
Well, if we were looking at the information, we could find out now. It's the problem that we're not looking. Last year, in a film that I made, which is soon going to be available on the website that I've been working on for the last 2 years, and which another person at Southern Exposure Seed Exchange helped me with the bibliography for it. We're going to have a big bibliography of articles there so people can go and see what's there. They're annotated, so you can just see what the articles are about and very quickly get a grasp of all the stuff that's out there that people haven't been looking at. But last year, I did a survey as part of one of the films that's going to be on this website, and interviewed people in 9 locations. Around in the East, Washington, up in New Jersey, here in Charlottesville, you know, several different locations. And out of that population of about 150 people, only about 10% really knew anything about Monsanto's seed business, what they were doing. Some of them knew that it was a chemical company, but they didn't know much else. They might have known a little bit about Agent Orange. But they didn't know what the current situation was that was going on. And I would say that probably that close to the majority had never even heard of Monsanto. So that's what we're up against. And we definitely have a tremendous big work to do. It's helped in the last year or so to have these debates coming up in Maine, Connecticut, Vermont, now New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey is coming up. They're getting these things into the legislature. There's some news getting out about labeling. And in Washington State, with their initiative this fall on the ballot, those things are helping to get people thinking about this more than they were back in early, even 2012, when they had, in that year, Proposition 37 coming up on the ballot in California on labeling. Now that ultimately lost by 2.8%. But to do that, they put together $46 million from 51 companies and their trade associations. To
get that 2.8% edge to keep it from happening.
That's right. And the pro side for labeling only was able to raise $8 or $9 million.
So what you're really fighting is not just someone who's making a big profit of doing something, but you're fighting the general ignorance and apathy of the public that's submitting themselves willingly to these things without recognizing the risk.
That's right. And now there's just been recently a study that came out asking farmers how many farmers would eat transgenic food. You know how many people were willing to eat transgenic food?
Yeah.
4%.
4.
Yeah.
Of the people that are growing it.
Yeah, 4 or 5%. Very small, okay. Small number of farmers are willing to eat it.
They're using it to pay the bills, but don't make me eat it.
That's right. I mean, they know what they're growing, and they go straight. I mean, I've had farmers tell me this personally. They go straight to the organic section whenever they go to buy groceries. Because they don't want anything to do with anything that they grow. They're willing to grow it as long as the market will buy it from them, which it is doing. Yeah, because it's paying the bills. But they don't want anything to do with it on their own table. And I also know people who, I mean, there's plenty of stories about this too, where farmers have raised transgenic crops, fed it to their hogs, caused their hogs to become infertile, ate the meat from the hogs and caused their family health issues, serious health issues. And yet this doesn't get publicized. All we have on this is anecdotal stories. We don't get any kind of major studies about it because of the control of the patent owner. We don't get, and the USDA collaborating with them.
Yeah. Now I can get free tests from the agriculture department or local or federal if I think I've got a disease or a problem. But if I want to find out if I've been contaminated with, what does it cost for you to prove a seed its genetic profile?
The cheapest test, and when you're doing a bunch of them, is a couple $100. And if you are just a single individual getting a test, it might be as much as $400.
So if I've got, and you said some of your growers had multiple lots of things that were trying to be non-transgenic, and some of the lots failed the test.
Yeah.
So really, even if you're growing different fields, you've got to, so you could spend thousands of dollars just testing to prove.
You don't even know
really a problem.
You might get a portion of a field contaminated, and that might not be the one that you tested. You in order to really know, you might have to look at every kernel, on every ear, because even one ear of corn, some of the kernels can be contaminated, and some of them might not be.
Every kernel's got its own little pollen. So.
Right.
Yeah, it's very challenging.
So what we can do as individuals is join a CSA, know our farmer, buy local, and start spending our money in that way.
Absolutely. I mean, it is, the thing that they've said all along, act locally first. You have the most control there. And of course, continue to take these larger actions. But the thing that you can do, and nobody else can stop you from doing, is where you buy your food, how you prepare your food, what you teach your children.
But even organics, Mike, there's a zero tolerance if you know about the contamination in organics. But if you don't know about it, then we operate under a much looser situation, where if the contamination has occurred and you haven't known about it, we have what's called a basically process-based standard, where the best efforts are good enough. Right. And so even in an organic crop, you can have contamination that the farmer didn't know about, and it gets into the market. So it's not just home free, by that, but you've got to be pretty daggone careful where you're buying from.
I was going to say that part.
Yeah.
I mean, just as with knowing your farmer, it's important to know your seed company, and there are seed companies that go beyond just what is required. Like, they don't require us to do this testing. We choose to do it. They don't require us, they suggest like quarter of a mile is plenty of isolation distance. We try to get our farmers to have 2 miles from anybody growing commercial corn. That just means people out in the outback are growing corn. Or they have to grow their corn at not the optimal time, so that their corn is not pollinating at the same time others are. And these things are something that are important. There's also a few efforts that are kind of surprising. The Cliff Bar Foundation has been funding this thing called Seed Matters, trying to get organic companies to invest more in making sure that the seed that they're using is pure. And that has been a little encouraging in the last couple of years. Well, just like, we're trying to have more localizing with farmers producing food, it's one of the things that we are working on, at Southern Exposure and other small companies, Fedco, with trying to retrain another generation of small seed producers, because it's something that people stopped doing, and they sort of forgot, and they had a lot of small-scale equipment that you can buy that's 50 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you buy new equipment, it's so much money.
Right, right.
It's like totally crazy.
And people really don't know how to take care of seeds.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we've got seeds. We have a special cooler
Yeah.
that's just for the seeds, and we have seeds that are 10 years old that we still use.
We-
the germination rate's down,
Yeah.
but they're not dead.
We laugh. We say we refrigerate. You know, at our place, we don't air condition the house, but
We air condition the seed,
seeds,
yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's right. So, you both have websites.
Yep.
Is there something specific where people can go to see about the 83 plaintiffs
Well,
in this
the
case?
website that I'm doing is the website of the plaintiffs, and I'm taking responsibility for it because others don't have time
What's
to
the
do
address
it.
for that?
endtransgenictrespass.org.
Okay.
And on that, there's also handout materials for people to take information and give it out to others, because it's a big public information campaign that we need to have in order to get people more informed about what's going on. Because so many people say, oh, I just want to eat what I want to eat. I don't want to be worried about, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And you can even talk, you can go anywhere you want to and find people that have that mentality.
I've been pretty lax myself until I recognized that I would know within 20 minutes if somebody had the modified oils, the olean and that stuff. And because my digestion just doesn't handle it. And we went to a pretty fancy restaurant. I mean, it was like $200 or $300 for a couple to have dinner, and I didn't even get to carry it home.
Oh.
It reacted so bad, my system just flushed.
I've had that happen right here in Charlottesville at
and-
restaurants too.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's usually traced to the oil. And often when you go to the people and find out what's going on, well, they got a special. The supplier had, you know, for half price,
Well, look at
they could get this cheaper oil, and it was.
Look at Whole Foods. They have canola oil in almost everything. And even the store employees think, oh, this can't be.
It's canola.
Yeah,
But all canola is GMO now, isn't it?
virtually, yeah. I mean,
How did Silk get away from the GMO soy?
Well, they just decided not to when the company was acquired by Dean Foods.
Oh, okay.
That's
So now it's just GMO Silk.
Right, and simply because cheaper, you know, they began to cut
Financially
corners.
can't.
They could. They're a big company, you know, but when basically.
Well, big companies with stockholders don't get to do good things because the
right.
stockholders say, I want money. So
Yeah.
what Ira and Don, you're both saying, we need the public to be aware. Get rid of the apathy, start voting with your dollars, and recognize that you're poisoning yourself if you don't spend more and get the true cost of good food.
I wanted to mention two other websites that have addressed these issues quite often. One is OSGATA, the Organic Seed Growers and Trade Association, which are lead plaintiffs in our lawsuit. And you just can keep up to date with what's going on.
PubPat too.
And then PubPat, but it's more of a total legal thing there, but they do tell you about the literal things on the lawsuit. And then the Organic Seed Alliance, that just gives you more about all of these issues around seeds and how to try to maintain a pure seed source. And where to go and find the position of the week, because you might as well. It doesn't take very much time to add that to your list of what you should do.
On this website, there is a page where all of the websites of all of the plaintiffs are,
Okay.
so that people can go to any of them. Cornucopia Institute, you know, whoever. I mean, there's original group of 14 seed companies, I believe, and that we're down to 13 now because some of the plaintiffs dropped out when we had to go to appeal. Some of them were frightened that they might have to pay Monsanto's court costs if we lost. And so we had about 9 plaintiffs drop out at that point. So we're down to 74 appellants. The original plaintiffs still do count as part of the total lawsuit, but people are free to decide. As far as we know now, no more are going to drop out on the appeal to the Supreme Court, which is coming up here next month, early next month.
And what happened in this appropriation bill in Virginia? Or no, it was a federal.
Yeah.
That they had a prohibition, an injunction against anyone bringing a suit against them.
This is what they call the Farmer assurance provision,
Right.
but that some of us call the Monsanto
Monsanto Protection Act.
Yeah.
Right. And,
Yeah.
here's
And
basic-
Senator King was like, I don't know how that got in there.
Yeah.
It doesn't even belong in
Well,
there,
here's how-
and no company needs to have an injunction
Here's how it-
against being.
Here's how it got in there. You can, in the Senate Appropriations Committee, a member can insert anything in without having to notify anybody else that they're doing it. So Roy Blunt, senator from Missouri, got together with Monsanto, and Monsanto's headquarters is in Missouri. He got together with Monsanto's lobbyists, and they wrote up these provisions. They tried to get it into other bills before that, but they finally slipped it into the continuing resolution on the budget back in March. Now that's coming up now again for renewal. And the chairman of the committee, the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, Barbara Mikulski from Maryland, she apologized for allowing that in.
Allowing it to happen.
But nonetheless, it is in there for 6 months until we see what happens. But they're going to try to slip this in somewhere else and keep it going. And it doesn't even, it's not even discretionary for the Department of Agriculture. It says the Secretary of Agriculture shall, when requested by farmers, release these crops onto the market, whether or not there's a court injunction stopping them from being released.
My
Yeah.
goodness.
Yep.
Well, we've seen that locally where in our little county, somebody put up some big billboards. And of course, the county didn't pay attention that they didn't have a prohibition against it. And so there were these huge billboards in this little rural county, great big metal things. And so they immediately passed a law of no more billboards, but they couldn't stop the ones that were there. And the company was, that's fine, we'll support that, because now we own the only billboards there.
Right.
And they went through the country and did that. And they hired all of the ex-Commonwealth attorneys to check and see if there would be any problem and to help their permits through the process without any undue attention so that they could get their materials built before the prohibitive local regulations would come into effect.
Right.
So all the little guys playing by the rules have a 2 square foot sign, and these guys have these great big things because they knew there was a hole in the law and they got their stuff in, and then so that's probably the next thing. Monsanto, well, you know, we've already got patents, but nobody can have any new patents.
They would love that. They'd be.
And then they'll just hold on to it.
Oh.
Oh boy. Well, thank you guys. This has been great. I'm scared to go eat now. Well, there you have it. The way that you can support local farms. Join a CSA. Buy from your local farmer. Go to the local farmer's market to avoid modified materials and patented genes in your food. This program is a production of Meet the Farmer TV, LLC, in association with Planet Earth Diversified, Melli Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design.